The US presidential election is around the corner and the polls are said to be shifting in Trump's favor. Welcome to Riks Europe, Roan Asselman, editor and America columnist for Rhetoric.
Thank you, Rebecca.
So the polls are said to be shifting in Trump's favor. Is this correct, and how much can we actually rely on these polls historically?
The second question is the real question, isn't it? No, it's true. The polls are shifting in the direction of Donald Trump. It should be said that this basically means that according to the polls today, it's a 50-50 race. It's a knife's edge, because there was a slight advantage for Harris, especially during the summer, early fall as well. But that advantage rather seems to have completely disappeared. It's basically a 50 race nationally, but also, and this is what really matters, in the battleground states. You asked how reliable are these polls? Well, this is the big question. Donald Trump was severely underpolled in 2016. His support was bigger than expected. He was, to a certain extent, underpolled in 2020, especially in a number of swing states up north. But of course, pollsters are always trying to correct for the mistakes that they made. At least if they're good pollsters, that's what they're trying to do. They did that to a certain extent, 2016 to 2020. And if it is true that they did it again, then these polls might be a good reflection of the current state of the race. But if it's true that Donald Trump is being underpolled again, well, then there's only one conclusion, and that is that Donald Trump is currently winning the race for the White House.
And you mentioned Kamala having kind of the upper hand during the summer. What do you believe is the reason for this shift?
Kamala Harris was what people wanted her to be for quite some time. So everybody kind of had their Kamala Harris, which meant that as long as she didn't do any interviews, she didn't really have to explain any of her positions or policy positions or otherwise. Everybody could kind of, make out of her what they wanted her to be. So there were many Kamala Harrises the moment she appeared on TV, and the moment I think people started to see more of her, they started to like her less, which is quite common for all politicians. But because Harris was so unknown really before the entry into the race, which is not unusual, by the way, for a vice president, things started to go downhill as soon as she was more in the public eye also. And I think this is another important element. A lot of the Kamala Harris hype, as I think we should call it, was also just an anti-Joe Biden hype. People were, I think, on the left side, particularly among the Democratic base, were quite happy that Joe Biden left. They weren't necessarily happy that Harris entered, which I think is a major difference. And I think the initial bump in the polls was mainly due to the disappearance of Joe Biden, not necessarily due to the entry in the race of Kamala Harris. And I think that difference, the fact that Joe Biden is a thing of the past now, it's all about Harris, is really hurting Harris in the last few weeks leading up to the election.
And obviously there's tons of rallies and campaigning now. And one particular rally at Madison Square Garden for Trump has sparked some controversy. Could you tell us more about that and how you believe it could affect his campaign or not?
So there's really two controversies here. One of them being one stand-up comedian who was there and who made a few inappropriate jokes towards people of a minority ethnic background. Comedians make jokes and some of them are quite bad, and some of those were quite bad. I don't think that will particularly hurt Trump in any way, really. The other one was that, Madison Square Garden in New York was once the stage for a Nazi rally, an American Nazi rally. And of course, and by they I mean people on the left, people in left-wing media in particular, are trying to make this into some kind of dog whistle that Donald Trump is trying to explain to his supporters, no, well, really I'm far right, and really I'm an authoritarian, and really I'm a Nazi, so vote for me. This makes not a lot of sense. Many presidents have at one point done rallies in Madison Square Garden. Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, both Democrats, George Bush as well, I think, Republican, obviously. So again, this is not news, really. I understand why you're asking me the question, because of course people are making it to be news in the mainstream media in particular. But no, what this does signify, the fact that Donald Trump is doing a rally in Madison Square Garden in New York, is that the Trump campaign is bullish. they think they're winning. And the Harris campaign also thinks that the Trump campaign is winning. That's why these attacks are coming, and that's why Trump is expanding into New York. He knows he's not going to win New York, but he thinks that he can broaden the map and make Kamala Harris rather play defense in her own backyard. He's going to New Mexico later as well, maybe by the time this podcast has come out. New Mexico is generally a Democratic state. It's not like California or New York, but it is quite Democratic. But Trump thinks he can at least make Harris very, very nervous about the battlegrounds and maybe even some of her own more Democratic states.
And you mentioned him sort of being portrayed now as a Nazi quite a lot by the left side. And Kamala recently also used this strategy again by bringing up an old statement, I believe, by Trump, referring to wanting loyal staff as they were loyal to Adolf Hitler. Could you tell us more about this what happening by Kamala and what you think of this strategy?
So the incident you're referring to is an interview done by John Kelly, who was one of Trump's chief of staff, so a former associate of Trump, who basically said that indeed Trump had made some comments in the vein of, well, I mean, if only I had the same kind of associates as Hitler, very loyal to me. Nobody knows if this was actually said. There is a certain tendency for former Trump employees to go into the talk circuit and to go into interviews with very mean things that Trump once said. So, kind of take it or leave it. It's unclear whether he actually said it. The Trump is Hitler line has, of course, been used many, many times over the years. And I think this is, again, hurting Democrats right now, because let's say this is true. First of all, it probably means that Trump dislikes the civil servants kind of vibe of government, and he's of course used as a CEO, as a media person, to have unquestioning loyalty from the people around him, because he can also easily fire them and he pays their paychecks. But let's say he actually meant something more nefarious with that. Well, you can only cry wolf so many times, right? The Democrats are the boy who cried wolf, the famous fable. They've been calling Donald Trump a Nazi for, I think, going on 8 years now. And there's a point where this just stops resonating. And I think that point was 7 years ago. And so Harris did her little speech, which I understand from a campaign perspective. But she probably knew that, well, this is going to be water off a duck's back. Trump has been called everything. And he's still running, and he's still probably winning.
If you can speculate and have your say, do you believe that, or who do you believe will win this election?
Yes, the question of 1 million. So first of all, I think anyone who tells you that they know, they don't. I think this really is a 50-50 race. I think the best thing you can say is that momentum is for Trump. Whatever advantage Harris had has been erased. So I would say, if things continue the way they have continued or they have been going for the past 2 weeks, I would say Trump, very narrowly. But honestly, for all the momentum Trump has, momentum isn't the same thing as votes. You can go from 10% to 40%, and that would be considered momentum, but you will still lose the election 40-60. So Trump has the momentum, but the election is 50-50.
Thank you, Roan Asselman, editor and America columnist for Rhetoric.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching Riks Europe.